today's Friday Talks. Today we are actually talking about Friday Talks. As you all know, that we started this with as a little discussion about general things, science and technology. We started it with AI, things like that. So this our Friday Talks, little by little, it grew up, and now here today we are talking about something very different, aviation industry. Mainly our target, I would like to remind you, the target, our main intention of these lecture series. This lecture series is basically to give an inspiration from other professions, to share the knowledge and experiences where we can take something for our lives. So how we can develop, how we can adapt technologies, techniques, knowledges, principles into our professional life. So based on that, so today we are talking about aviation. I warmly welcome Captain MALIK LATIFF. I personally don't know much about Captain Latif's professional life, but what I personally know is that he is a good teacher. I got to know Captain Latiff when I was working with at Urban Architects, where he's the beloved husband of architect Sheila Latif, who is my loving teacher. So what I can remember is the days where we went to Singapore with Captain Latif, where he shared his experiences, how complicated things are. The subject is very complicated, but he explained little by little how it works. So it was very inspirational for me, and I learned a lot and adapted many things, many strategies using in aviation industry. So I got. So that's why I thought of inviting him to today's Friday Talks. So our main purpose is to give an insight about aviation while giving you an inspiration to all for professional responsibility and professional negligence. So as a tagline, I would like to say that when flight crew makes a mistake, it's a flight air disaster. And when architects do make mistakes, it's social and economical disaster. So we both have responsibilities. So we both have very critical responsibilities, and teamwork is especially essential for both professions. So I hope that you will get something from the aviation industry to our industry. Let's see. Captain Latif, I would like to invite. Before that, please rise up for the national anthem.
Namo Namo Maya. I guess I start from here. All right. Just stand here, is it? That okay? Okay. So good evening, everybody. Thanks, Tarinder, for the introduction, and thanks, Sham, for inviting me here. This is not something I do talking to non-aviation people. I think this is the first time I'm doing this. But I do some or a little bit of talking and classroom work as well. So just to give you a quick introduction about myself, my name is MALIK LATIFF. Studied at Royal College. I left Royal in the batch is 1991, but I actually left in 1990. And funnily, my chosen profession or my career path was headed towards civil engineering, because my father ran a construction company, so I was exposed to the construction field sort of as a kid. Went with my father to see sites. When he went to supervise, I was there. Probably after O-levels, I spent some time helping out, did some of the visits on my own, just to do all the small things that need to be done. And, accompanied him on many memorable visits. And studying for my A-levels, one of my very close friends who, wanted to do flying probably from the time he was a kid. So I would spend many an afternoon at his house going through some of the flying or aviation books which he was studying. And the other afternoons I was at my house looking at the books from school, which was I did double maths at that time, and physics and chemistry. So 4 subjects which physics, yes, something even to date interests me a lot, but chemistry was very, very tough. So comparing my book to my friend's book, I was like, okay, that book seems a lot more interesting. So that's how my switch over took place. So it was a fairly quick sort of decision process. And then moved on to trying to convince, because, and this was a while ago, this was probably 1990. So at that time, not too many, there were pilots, but again, it was not a very common sort of profession chosen. So lots of questions about it, and convincing my mother was took a little longer than the father. But eventually did, and then followed sort of my career path, or this new dream that suddenly virtually fell into place because of my friend's influence. So yes, started that. I flew here at Ratmalana, so not far from here, just around the corner. So that was 1990. I did my private pilot's license here, and at that time the commercial license was not conducted. So when they had enough of students, the students collected money and paid for this British examiner to fly down here, stay a couple of days in the hotel, conduct the exam for us. So there was no fixed date. There was an existing program about 4 or 5 months before. Tried hard to finish the syllabus, set the exam, hope for a bit of luck, but I needed to get 6 subjects with at least 4 passed. I missed getting my 4 passes by about 2 or 3 marks. So I had 3 plus 1 at, I think, pass mark was 70. I had a 68 or a 69. So just missed that. So then I had to, next one was beyond the horizon. We'd had to wait for at least another year or 2. So I then flew, went to the US to do my commercial license, which I completed. And that was 92, and then started, luckily there was an interview and an intake of pilots soon after that, and I joined Sri Lankan in 93. So yes, next year it will be 30 years, April next year, so long time. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. And yes, joined Sri Lankan Airlines April of '93, and I've been with the company since. Of course, right now the company is going through some hard times. The aviation industry itself was devastated with COVID. All planes almost on ground. We were at home most of the time. So, just recovering from that. Also, the current situation here has just added sort of delayed or is dragging the recovery process. Where some of the other airlines have, bounced back very quickly. We are still taking small steps, but still recovering. So moving on to enlighten you guys about flying and what happens here in this. Before I get into that process, the two big things that we come across is threats and errors. So I just want to highlight that part about you. I'm not going to ask you questions and ask you to define these things. So threats can be looked at in different ways, but a very simple definition for that is anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. It can be, I'll just give you a little example of that. There were two people who went to a restaurant, two independent people, and both of them were waiting for their friends to join. And there was this third person who went into that restaurant and took a gun and left it on top of the table. Now, one person was a female who was there waiting for her friends to join. She looked at this guy seated 2 tables away with a gun on the table. She got up and immediately left that restaurant. Called her friends and said, "Don't come in here. There is a crazy fellow here seated with a gun on the table. We'll go somewhere else." Because she was threatened. No one said anything. There were no words spoken, but just the action or just by seeing that a weapon on the table. Now this other guy who was at the restaurant saw this gun, walked up to that guy and said, "I'm so-and-so. Hi, what's your name? What's this model? Where did you get? Where do you go shooting? Can I join you guys? Yeah, let's meet up next weekend." And that was a complete different perspective for the other guy. So just to show you that not everything is a threat to everyone. Some person might look at a knife and say, I'm a chef, I work with knives and no problem. Somebody else might be, scared of knives. So similar thing. So that's just something to keep in mind and just looking at it. So what I was asked here is just to give you a brief thing on how flights or how things are planned and how things work. So very roughly to tell you, a flight or going somewhere starts about 6 to 8 months before. It starts by the company through the country, representatives negotiating to fly into another country with their representatives from that country. So it could be only the state, or it could be the state and the local airline. Because sometimes the states agree and say, okay, one of you guys fly and y'all do a financial share with the other airline. So those permissions are granted first. Then our schedulers, they plan on how often we can fly there. We might want to fly more. They might say no. Or they might say you can fly a lot, but we might say no, we don't want to fly that often. So these things are planned. And not only to one country, it's planned to our entire network. And then they see how many planes we have and how can we fill all these flights, and then crews and all that, because sometimes you can maybe lease or hire 2 more planes to do all these flights, but you might not have pilots and cabin crew to do that. So then that whole process takes place. So we work roughly on 2 schedules. It's like a timetable. So we have a summer timetable and a winter timetable. So that is generally how things happen for the planning stage. Now moving on to the actual flight itself, we have, so before the pilot gets involved, there is a licensed dispatcher. He has gone through a process. He has a current license, which he renews every year with the authorities. And he is like sort of the chief planning officer for the flight. So he roughly starts work about 4 to 6 hours before a particular flight departs. And he starts by planning the work. And when you look at like ingredients to plan a flight, I'll just going to glance at some of the notes I have here. So ingredients to start a flight, we have, so we are primarily a passenger airline. Okay, so passengers, we first look to see how many passengers are there. Say, for example, from today, Colombo to the Maldives, how many passengers do we have? So that there are two lots there, the passengers going from Colombo and passengers coming in from other countries on our other flights or maybe other airlines and connecting through Colombo. They don't actually get off at the airport, get into the country. They just get off the plane, move around in the airport and get on the next plane, which is our plane to the Maldives. So once all those numbers are done, then they look at, okay, depending on the number of people, what sort of aeroplane should go. Should it be a big plane? So there are planned ones which are scheduled. Sometimes if there is an option, they might say, okay, today the load is poor, only a few passengers, we'll just downgrade and go on a smaller plane. Or we'll upgrade. Can happen either way. Again, on availability, they'll see if we can't do anything. Yes, we do sometimes take a big plane and fly a few people. So he does all that sort of planning. So passengers first, then cargo. Cargo also, I'm not talking about the passengers' baggage. This is a commercial cargo. Could be, fresh flowers, fresh food, and so on. So that again, like the passengers, there's cargo that's coming from other places that need to go. Maldives imports, I think, a big percentage of what they consume, from food stuff to all that. So perishable cargo is something that they air freight. Most other things that are non-perishable, it's shipped purely for cost reasons. So all that is planned, and so sometimes it could be a choice of, okay, actually the passengers are low, but we have a lot of cargo today, so we will use a big plane. There again, decisions could be made. So each department sort of does their part. Cargo will do their part, passenger, commercial will do their part, and the flight dispatcher coordinates the whole thing. And also he makes sure that there are pilots today to fly this plane, and there are enough cabin crew, because if the type changes, sometimes the pilots might not be qualified to do that, and sometimes we might not have enough cabin crew, because the bigger plane carries, a few more crew than the smaller one. Roughly 6 to 12. So that's the difference. So about 1 hour prior to the departure of an aeroplane or a flight, the cockpit crew, we report to an office within the airport, and we take over from this flight dispatcher. So the flight dispatcher will brief us on 10 different points. Okay, this is what you have, this is the weather, this is the equipment we are flying, these are some problems, maybe there's a fault on the aeroplane. If it's a very bad, serious fault, we can't do the flight, but there are lots of minor faults. We might have a couple of lights not working inside the cabin, we might have a couple of screens, maybe a coffee machine, but we have 4 coffee machines, so then there's not a problem. Yes, managing the issue with 3 coffee machines is a problem, but it's not something impossible. We don't cancel a flight for that. So all those come into consideration, and eventually, the entire responsibility is then on the captain. He will make the decision, he will make things. So, but he is briefed. I would say close upon 80% of the planning work, or 90% of the planning work, is done by the planning guy, which is the dispatcher. So we have the aircraft dispatcher. Even on ground, there is a ground coordinator called, he's called the ground dispatcher. I was referring to operations dispatcher. And then those guys together work and get this aeroplane going on time, or if they can, a few minutes early, we depart. Lately, there have been added elements in this, like fuel. Just as much as cars have been and motorcycles have been without fuel and buses without fuel, aeroplanes have been without fuel. Again, it was like a new department. We had to come up with a new group of people just to manage the fuel resource. Because we went from, the full resource available to partial, and that went down in about 3 stages, and then eventually one morning it was no fuel out of Colombia. And then after that we started, fuel came back, or they were able to source fuel again. And for those of you who are interested, it's kerosene oil. That's what planes fly on. Jet planes fly on slightly cleaner or purified version of kerosene. That's the grade of fuel. So once the pilots take over the flight, then it's very technical from a pilot's point of view. Because now all the other departments have put in, most departments, their work ceases once this aeroplane, the doors close and it starts moving. The moment it moves, everything sort of points or reverts back to the captain of the aeroplane. Now, just to give you again some added information, this responsibility is a very powerful responsibility that a captain has. So that responsibility derives from Act of Parliament, because the captain of the aeroplane is the judge, well, I would say a couple of steps below God, right? So you can sign for births, for deaths. In a serious hijack condition, somebody can kill somebody on orders of the captain. It's not something that happens regularly, but I know there was an incident, it happened with the airline was Saudi, it happened somewhere in Africa, where on ground there was a fight and something was going on, and the crew member took a huge, like a silver jug that they served tea in, and hit this passenger on the head and they killed him. Absolutely nothing. Captain had to say, this was done, and with my permission. Sometimes medical emergencies, it becomes very difficult to handle. Nobody is medically trained. I mean, to be trained in medicine, I don't think, other than putting a plaster on a finger, you need years of training. You can't go mess around with people's health with, hanging out at a pharmacy for a few weeks, or at a reception of a hospital for a few weeks and say, yeah, I'm half a doctor, So that can't be. We can't even give passengers Panadols. That has been removed. We used to be able to do it, but not anymore. So even the paracetamol now is a restricted. We have it on board, but it's restricted. And even I, as a captain, can't use it. The box which contains all of this is in the cockpit. It's sealed and it's kept there. I have to make sure there's a doctor. I need to glance at his ID card, or a licensed nurse. If they are on board, I can then open that box and access things. Or give it to them, they will access, because I have no idea. Recently I had a lady who had a very low pulse. She blacked out. And I must say that was one of the lucky days, because we had a group of 14 doctors returning from Australia. And one of the doctors I knew personally who had treated me prior. So when I asked him, why aren't you getting? I am very junior. There are 3 professors here. I will leave it to them. Let them sort this problem out. They know what they're doing. And he continued watching. I said, you are a Mara fellow. He said, I'm going to watch my movie here. Let the professors do this. So that lady got lucky, But sometimes people don't get lucky, and you struggle. There have been crews that have delivered babies. Childbirth has taken place on board. I think once in about average of about 1 birth in about 5 years, 3 years. Yeah, this year already it took place for 2022. We've had one. I think COVID, that whole period we did. Probably about 2015 was the last one. So, sometimes these things happen. People, sometimes it's very simple, small things. Sometimes it can be more serious, especially on the longer flights. Older people travel and all that. Your body is not comfortable in that environment. So you get from nose bleeding. There was another gentleman who he was on that same flight where we had 14 doctors, On the landing, just coming into land, he started bleeding from his nose, and they were like, no, we know the captain. He's a friend of ours. You tell him. So the stewardess said, sir, I'm sorry, but he's flying the plane now. He has to land the plane. He can't come and look at you, and he doesn't know anything about medicine. I mean, if at all, actually, they know more about that than me. So yeah, that things like that also do happen. So once, as I said, the law is very strong about what rights people have on board, because it becomes very complicated when you take a plane and then fly over another country, and then that country's laws, or whose laws apply to whom, where, when, whatever. So from the time doors are closed till the door opens at any other country in the world, all the laws remain according to Sri Lankan law. And it is through that act in parliament, through what is the control of the law is passed on to the captain. And if there is a robbery, there is a murder, I mean, two people fight each other, kill each other, whatever it is, or somebody is born or somebody dies, all that rests with the captain. So paperwork-wise, he has to sign even the birth certificate or death certificate. So most departments move out once this captain takes over and moves the plane. There are few who keep in touch with the crew. So mainly it is operations control. So operations control has a tracking, they track this aeroplane. So if they know I'm going, on Gaul Road and I turn off Gaul Road, they can see this. And then they will try to figure out why, and then try to contact me, and okay, if it's an emergency, then because if there is an emergency on board and I decide to deviate from the path, or go to, instead of going from A to B, I decide to go to C. First, I would deal with the emergency and figure out all these things about how do I go to C. And my last priority is to inform the company in Colombo that yes, I'm not going to my destination B, but I'm diverting to C. So they usually will see that happen before, and then they will try to contact me. And depending again on contactability on aeroplanes and where we are in the sky, they establish that. And then they get to work. Even if they can't contact me, they will assume certain things and try to work ahead to tell somebody there that to expect me that yes, one of our aeroplanes is coming, because that having support on the ground is makes a huge difference. Then you show up there and land, and they're like, okay, where are you? Who are you? We don't know you, and why did you come here? Whereas if somebody can start those things on ground before, it's a huge amount of assistance, even if it's even a sick passenger. In some countries, you can divert, they can speak the language or they speak English. Some places don't. You divert somewhere in China, they'll have to go and find a translator and come for you. I mean, it's very difficult there. Even the big airports, it's difficult. You go into a small airport, just to say that somebody is sick might take you about an hour. So it can become very complicated that way, in that sense. So this tracking guys, they monitor the flight. Now they have the plan with them, and they see what differences we encountered during the flight. They make notes of this, and all this stuff goes into like a debriefing of that flight. So after the flight, they'll say we planned for 100 liters of fuel, but he consumed less, or he consumed more. So reasons, all those things they'll monitor. And at the end of the flight, I write a report as well as to any major deviations, changes, as to what happened. So that also goes with their report. And then a team in our office will go through all these things. So if they find regularly they are saving fuel on something else, then they will, in the future plan with less fuel. Because for us, carrying extra fuel also costs money, also costs more fuel. So unlike a car where you can just go put a full tank of fuel, if we need only 10 liters, we just carry only 10 liters. There are some safety margins and safety elements built into that amount of fuel. It's not just only to go from A to B, but we don't carry unnecessary. Also, it could be a trade-off. That amount of fuel, if you carry less, you can carry more baggage or more cargo. So that cargo will give us revenue, so again that's going to cost us. So just to give you a rough idea, on a 10-hour flight, typically to London or Australia, we will carry approximately 75,000 liters on the big plane. Smaller planes consume a lot less. And once the aeroplane sort of goes and parks at the destination, again, I have a report log which I sign off. And once that is signed, my responsibility on that plane or that flight is over. I am done. That's one of the actual things that attracted me a lot to this profession, more than the the concept of flying and being a pilot and flying the aeroplane. Work is very, very specific. I will work longer hours than most other professions. If you look at the time I leave home in my uniform, sometimes to either get back home or go to a destination and get out of my uniform in a hotel, it can border close to about 20 hours. The legal maximum we can work, there are things we can do to extend time and all that. We can go up to about 18 hours maximum. So 18 hours is a very, very long day on anyone's standard. But we don't, I mean, normal flights don't go that long. But that would be a worst case scenario. So, but you sign that off, tomorrow is a fresh day. There is nothing I carry forward from today where I have to, which I see in almost all other professions. Architects, you guys, you all have a project coming up, you might work 24 hours and then have to work another 24 hours to finish. When you guys studied, I know you all did this. Whereas for the pilot, comes, parks, finished. It is clean cut. If I have, 48 hours, what I do in that 48 hours is left to me. I can sleep for 48 hours if I can. I can go on a trip if I want to. I don't have to be at home. There is nothing. From a personal point of view, you know that time and you know that time is yours. All I have to be conscious of is when that time finishes, what is my next duty? I need to get proper rest. And if you do consume alcohol, you have to make sure that alcohol levels have gone back down to the acceptable levels. So that needs a bit of a lead time. You have to think, yes, if you're flying early in the morning, that means you can't drink tonight. So that needs to be sorted out. I don't drink, so it's not a problem for me. But that's the only concern, which for me it's not a concern. So like I've been off yesterday and today, and I'm flying again tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I just need to make sure I get enough sleep, because for a flight that leaves at 7:25, so leaving at 7:25, I'll probably leave home at about 5:25 or 5:15, so that I get there at 6:15, go through security and all that, and at 6:25 I get to my little office counter, 1 hour before. So that is very briefly the overall planning, this thing of the flight. Now going back to what I spoke about, the threats and errors. Threats, so just like guns being on tables, I know you don't see these very often, but there are so many other threats. You just step out onto the road here, almost everything moving on the road is a threat, right? But so there are threats in aviation. Threats are many. And sometimes the consequences of the threat, if it is not handled, managed, or catered for, could be very serious. Right? In a worst case scenario, even death. Talking about a little bit about what Tarinder said in the introduction, unlike again lots of other professions, here if it is not managed well, I too will pay the consequence. Right? If, I don't know, maybe you build a building that's not good enough and it collapses, maybe you might not be in that building. Right? We just joke about this. I don't know whether any doctors here, but sometimes they say this, surgeons will say, operation was successful, but the patient died. So yes, successful operation, did the transplant right, but again, how the body reacts to that. You might do a perfect thing, a little later, person starts bleeding profusely, allergic reaction to some medication or something used in the surgery. So fine when they finished, but 12 hours later, the guy dies. So these things do happen. So aviation, though, for us, if it's not dealt with, that's a high price we pay. That is one. Two is resources are very limited. At the planning stage, till those doors close and we get going, we have a lot of things to do, or a lot of people we can access. Once we close doors and start moving, the resource is only what you have on board that aeroplane. You're lucky if you have a doctor to deal with the emergency, medical emergency. If you don't, you don't. If you have an unruly passenger, somebody who's drunk, who's fighting, who's harassing others, harassing a female, for example. So on board, it's very difficult. You'll be lucky if you have to off-duty policeman traveling, or some guy who can handle other people. But the average, there are some flights you do where you might find one guy, or even the cabin crew is all girls. Now, trying to deal with a male, big-made, strong-looking, a guy who's intoxicated, very difficult. You can't find a volunteer. All the girls want to run, no, he can't do it. Sometimes passengers help out in these sort of situations. The threats are, we have it in, it's all over that whole aviation industry. Now, talking about what do you do when you have, how do you all deal with threats? On a general basis, forget about architecture as people, as human beings. We just talk about crossing a road. What do you do? How do you deal with it? Right? You all have all crossed roads. You all have all walked the streets of Colombo. We specify the streets of Ratnalanam. Yeah. So how do you deal with it, and how does a person, we'll talk about, maybe Sham has a British client who comes here, tomorrow, and then how does he deal with it day after? You guys might cross the road, but that fellow might take like 2 hours to cross the road. Right? So we have mechanisms we have dealt with, we have experience. Experience is a key thing, or knowledge, or somebody has to teach you in a classroom. Right? So once that is done, you all cross the road, and I drove from Bambalapitiya to here, and I didn't see any accidents on the road. But if you typically ask a British guy or anybody, they'll say, my God, these Sri Lankans drive like mad people. There are buses and three-wheelers and all creeping all over the place. But yeah, we didn't. But you take one of our buses or three-wheelers and put it in one of the British roads, how long do you think it will take before an accident? Won't take long. So those are the two sides of it. Knowing about a threat, knowing mistakes. So we have sort of programs within the company. Non-punitive acceptance of mistakes when errors take place, right? At any stage, whether it's engineering error, flight crew error, if you own up to that, because it's a very typical Sri Lankan thing, and a mistake is detected. I detect a mistake here at this table, and I ask, okay, who kept this water here? It's not clean water. Everybody looks to the other person. Even the person who poured the water, it's not me. I don't know, I poured water. Right? So these things happen, but in an industry like this, periodically there could be people due to fatigue, due to tiredness, due to bad weather, things can go wrong. So by identifying this, so we have a network that attracts. Almost every department has a safety guy involved in that department that is connected to the safety department. So this is mainly talking about the, not the office staff per se, people who work behind desks and screens and service areas and all that. But talking about the people who are on the field. Field meaning the engineers who are walking around, the pilots who are moving around, the cabin crew, people who are sort of, even in the airport, within the airport, people moving around, people bump into each other. There was a time when everyone was looking at their phone and walking around. and bumping into passengers, bumping into old ladies, bumping into children. And sometimes, you're walking a little fast and you bump into an old person. You put that person on the ground and, they can fracture something, old people especially, and even young children. So these sort of things, then we looked into those and said, okay, just make sure nobody is looking at texts or looking at things when walking. Because you walk, airport is like home for you. Passengers are clueless, they are looking up at boards and signs and trying to figure out whether to go left or right. But the people who are used to the environment just move around very fast. They will look left and walk right. These sort of situations catch, so these sort of threats, whether it is in the airport, whether it is outside, in and around aeroplanes and all that, things sometimes go out of sync. So all these things we try to gather information and see where it is, what it is. Because if you have, say for example, there's a speed limit for all equipment or all vehicles moving around aircrafts, there is a speed limit. Now, a person goes and knocks somebody, but he was under the speed limit, right? Whether it's somebody or another piece of equipment or hits another aeroplane for that matter. Now, hitting an aeroplane is a huge cost. Forget the cost of the damage. If that aeroplane needs to be pulled out of service, 300 passengers have to be put in a hotel, given meals, till an alternate is sourced, or that aeroplane is fixed. So cost-wise, that can, a whole month's profit can just evaporate over one error. So, but if this guy was speeding, that is where they will now say, no, you were speeding when you hit this. So for that, you have to be punished. There will be a penalty for those sort of things. But if the guy was, he was under the limit and he knocked, or the other guy also looked the other way or looked the wrong way and came, or going down a one-way, this thing, right now there's a lot of construction around the airport. That whole expansion, half of it has stopped. It's crazy. You see the terminal, you see the door you're going to get off about 3 times before the bus finally gets to that door. Right, because it zigzags. It goes, at one point it goes within about 20-30 feet of that door and puts a U-turn and goes all the way the other way. Because there's a trench there, so you can't go through it, go right on. So in these sort of situations, it just adds about another 100% risk. So yes, they manage all these things. There's more time given. People go early. So it's all about, we can't as human beings live in a threat-free world. A threat-free industry or world does not exist. Right? We all are seated here. Okay, it's not a hanging fan, but that fan can fall down. Might hit that and something might hit you. We don't know that. These things can happen. To make sure that that thing is fitted properly. The fan. Or you sit away from it or whatever it is. So we manage the risks with what the resources we have. So that is general thing. So this is all the feedback channel. So every flight that takes place, there is feedback. This feedback is compiled and then it moves into the relevant departments. Okay, we need to train the drivers better. We need to train the cargo loader, can't drive. He needs to be trained better. So wherever there is a lack, right? There's like an electric buggy that runs around in the airport to assist with, not disabled, but passengers with difficulties in walking around. So they are mobile, but they might be older, or like a young mother traveling with about 3-4 small kids. It's difficult for her to walk. Yeah, all 3 kids want to walk in different directions. So they put them into a buggy and transport them long walks and so on. So these sort of things, the guy driving that can't drive it like a normal car. That's a very open thing. You accelerate fast or you brake hard, people are going to fly off the sides. So he needs to be very patient, no hurry to go from A to B, and plus he can't knock other people in the airport. Our airport is generally not one of the most spacious airports around. So limited spaces. He can't run over people and so on. So yes, they just, when they implemented or brought the buggy, there was no, because there is no license requirement. Legally, there is nothing required. So they were like, okay, anyone who can go, go. And then we had a few accidents, and then after that, everyone stopped and now the buggy is parked and kept. No, for a while. Then they eventually figured out, okay, let's take a handful of guys and girls and train them. So I think one of the prerequisites was that you can drive. Not legally required, but at least if you drive, you know how to steer, what happens when you go left and right and accelerate and so on. The basics are known. Now you take the basics and turn everything down 80% because this thing runs only at 20%. So everything, space, the speed, the way you stop them. So these are methods used in that mitigation process. And even sort of department to department. Now when you talk about the planning process, when you take people doing the first hour's work, the second hour's work, then the handover, one of the big things that is in the aviation industry is a checklist. So we have when I go for a flight, I have like a 12-point checklist that the dispatcher has looked into everything, ticked it off, and if there are any comments on each one of those, he can put a comment. This, I have given you this option, but there are two options, right? You are going to, say from here to Dubai. Dubai, the weather is okay, but not great. Or it's forecast to be, pretty bad. Then these are your options. If you can't land in Dubai, there are 3 or 4 options I have got for you. And he'll make a comment. So I have to make sure that I see all those things. And we discuss those things, so that handover. Now this is done even for a flight that has absolutely no comments to be done. So whether it's a standard, they have over the years with experience, we have come to those 12 points. 12 points are discussed whether there is nothing or whether there are lots of comments made. So these, the checklists is something that has been in aviation, I don't know, from very, very early on. Even the small planes we used to fly, there are 10 items you have to do before you go. So you have to do those 10, like it or not. Now, about 7 years ago, the Royal School of Surgeons in Colombo, they also was briefed like architects by a pilot. They were briefed, and apparently the most common surgery done, I think in the world, maybe not just only Sri Lanka, is abdominal surgery. So this covers any type. It's not specific to the type. It is something to do with your stomach. So you're being cut open to do whether it's liver, kidney, whatever, right? Intestines. So it's a tummy surgery. They came out with a checklist which they go through before closing. Right? So this was implemented again, maybe about 9 years now. 9 years ago, it was implemented here in Sri Lanka. And in the medical field, the checklist use is now in a lot of countries. They use it. And I was so surprised. There was an incident that happened at home where a very young child, probably the age of about 2 or 3, we found that she had eaten, that fly poison, which looks like sugar, like a pink color sugar grains. She had consumed. We didn't know what or how much. When that treatment, we took her to Lady Ridgeway, and at Lady Ridgeway, a relatively young doctor came up and said, okay, we'll mix it like this. And he, because it was charcoal, it was just powdered charcoal in a bottle, they had to just put in clean water in there and make it a syrup and, give it to her. He got the mixture wrong. The ratio, he made a mistake. Now, he was trying to use this and something from a new bottle and make make his own calculation to compensate for the inaccurate ratio here with the new bottle. The senior nurse just came and grabbed that bottle, said, "Doctor, we are not calculating this. We'll remake that new one. This is getting thrown," and she chucked it. That child is not going to die because you are going to make a mathematical problem, mathematical mistake. I never expected that to happen in Sri Lanka. Where a nurse tells the doctor, "Sorry, wrong, redo, new bottle, old bottle gets chucked." This happens in other countries. It can be a top, cardiac surgeon, neurosurgeon, whatever it is. Where a nurse will tell the doctor, "Doctor, you are stitching wrong or you can't do it like that." That fear. So aviation, we encourage that a lot. When we have a new, a junior young person, I can be the most senior guy. I'm an instructor now with the airline. Even tomorrow's flight is a training flight. So when we train, even the trainee might notice something that, is not right. It's okay. Open your mouth and speak. I'm not going to chew your head off. Or I'm not going to scold you. You have to be able to speak even to your boss, even to your instructor, even the manager of our department. If he's wrong, and none of us as senior people, we don't, it's just a normal for us. We've got used to it. We don't, if somebody points out a mistake I made, no, thank you. I don't have to, there is no requirement for me to look at him or frown at him or this thing, because, it might be some small thing. It might be actually something very good that he pointed out, because I made a mistake in some calculation or whatever it is. So that's about it about flying, which I have for you all. Just looking at the future of aviation, technology, we were just talking about it here before we started off. Technology is going into every profession, whether it's doctors, architects, pilots, anything. The new technology is amazing. We don't see what happens. We will see only the final product once it has gone through the process and comes, onto the software programs we use or the equipment we use and so on. But, artificial intelligence is going to play a huge part. Even aeroplanes are getting very sophisticated. The technology is just going through the roof. It's if you can afford to buy the new things and the new aeroplanes, it's fantastic. But yes, it's all coming at a cost, real cost in dollars or rupees. So that is the hitch with the new technology. It's not cheap. It comes out at a price. And so with all this happening, though, there is one challenge to aviation, and I think that challenge is applicable again across the board to all industries. It's the human. The human is not changing much, not like how the technology is changing. And we forget, and the humans do change. It's not that they don't change, but it's a different way. And what actually holds back or creates a lot of problems is, the way and the generation. They talk about, the parent can't understand the child. So here you will have, like in an office like yours, you might have somebody working here who's the age of a parent joining versus a young architect who has joined straight after university. You might have a 60-year-old senior architect here who's again dealing with this. So again, then you'll have two architects not understanding each other, just like the parents. Because we have, going back in time, people always wanted to do, I did it like this, so you have to do it like this. But that's not the case. You might know a better way of doing it. You might know a shortcut. You might know a very efficient way of doing it. I see it at home every day. When I'm stuck with my iPad or my laptop, I look at my daughter here. This is one, but she's only half the help. Then I have to go to the younger one. She will complete the task. And then she says, see, you should ask me straight. Don't waste your time asking him. So that is the generation gap. That is where we, with all this new technology and all these fancy things happening, the human element is a little slow, is moving in a different way. The older, the senior people look at a junior person and say, I can't understand what the hell that fellow is doing. They do it differently. Things that motivated me don't motivate a young person. Things that attracted me, absolutely no clue to a young person. I may have liked to go and play on the road or whatever. Even driving a car, I was really surprised. One of my friend's sons, so the father said, okay, your 21st birthday, I can't buy you a new car and all that, I'll give you a car. I don't want a car. No, give me something else, but not a car. I absolutely don't. I don't want a car. If you're giving me a car, I want to drive it. I don't want to drive. I don't want to get a license. To me, the age group I grew up, that would be your dream. Turn 18 and somebody says, I'm going to give you a father, or somebody says, I'm going to give you a car. Yes, with the driver, kick the driver out. I'm not going to let him touch the car, Young guys, "No, I don't want a car. If you're giving the car, give me the driver. I don't want to drive. I can do a lot more things more interesting than drive a car and sitting in traffic." That's okay. So that is the young generation. That human factor is going to affect every office, every industry. You might not. So that's where general future is going. And just to conclude, the last thing was, the airports around the world. I've been lucky to go to a lot of these airports. I have seen a lot. Tarinder was just talking about it, going to Singapore. To me, Singapore airport is, the gold standard in this region. It's a fantastic airport. It handles huge numbers of people. You barely see the people in that airport. It always looks as if it's like, less than optimum, the crowds. But it's actually more than optimum. It's just that they are very efficient. Walking distances from where you get off cars to get onto aeroplanes is the shortest. Dubai is one of the worst. You have to walk for miles and miles and miles just to get out of that airport. So that way, so that's where I guess for you guys, and especially I think there are some young people here who are just getting into uni and all that, looking at, yes, the design wise, I think Dubai looks fancier. Visually Dubai looks fancier than Singapore, but Singapore just works better. They work better from even the people, the nature of the people there, that's the start, the way they work. They had a fire about 5 years ago, small fire in some kitchen. Now some like a, fast food guy, they called in 200 people who were off, who were at home. When the fire started, somebody sat on a phone and called office staff to get into office. Every department, they had at least 10, 15 extra people coming in. We don't know what you're coming for, but just come. So they were so quick just to react to that fire. This is in addition to, the firefighters coming and all that. I'm not talking about that. This is just staff. They just wanted more staff because they knew this is going to cause a problem and we need more people to help deal with the situation. So very efficient operation there. And you get this, there have been, I think in Germany, I'm sure if you Google this, you'll find out, there was an airport built. I think it looked fairly all right. I've seen some pictures of it. Never used. Yes. And they, I think, closed it or they're pulling it down now. Because someone did something wrong and, yeah, cost. Airports are not easy. It's not like, I don't know. Something went wrong somewhere. Whether it was the runway itself that was not right, the airport building, there was this thing or structurally failed or whatever. I don't know. You can Google that and find out. But something went wrong somewhere. So something was not looked at and cost. So a poor country or a small country like us, we build something like that and we have to put it apart. Economy won't move anywhere for 20 years to recover from that. Whereas, Germany is a very rich country and I guess they can afford to have that, but still a huge loss. That's it that I have to talk to you about. I thought I'll leave it very casual and anything you all want to ask, you all are open to aviation, outside the aviation, whatever it is.